Thank you to Deborah for repeat invites. This is actually my third presentation, and I'm delighted to be here. Just to give you a bit of background, so I had my bachelor's degree in art history from 1994, and then started volunteering at museums and eventually started working in galleries. I managed a fine art photography gallery in Portland, Oregon from 1998 to 2004. And during that time in 2002, I actually came to New York and did the NYU program for fine art appraisal studies. So I have been a photography appraiser for the last 12 years. I am also certified in photography with the Appraisers Association of America. And I came back to New York just a couple years ago to get my master's in the history of art, and again, specifically in the history of photography. So that is my basic background, and above and beyond being in the system, within the business, I also have many, many friends who are working photographers, both fine art photographers, whether we represented them, whether they're acquaintances, but also editorial freelance or photojournalists. So I do get feedback, and I try and incorporate anecdotes, horror stories, as well as stories of success and positive. So one of the things that I tend to concentrate on is portfolio review conferences as one of the best ways that people can show their work one-on-one with professionals in the industry who can give you opportunity. And we're talking about curators, photo editors, as well as gallerists. And so the one that I've participated the most in is Lucida, which is based in Portland, Oregon. And it's a smaller version of Houston Photo Fest, if any of you are familiar with that conference. So what they do is the dollars you spend, which is, I believe it's either $750 or $800, that money goes toward bringing professionals to Portland for 4 days of portfolio reviews. And these are national people, they're also international. We've been seeing curators from China, we've been seeing gallerists from New York, we've seen curators from San Diego, Chicago, Florida, from all over. And what's extraordinary about this is you sign up, they pre-post their reviewer list, and it can be 75, 100 different individuals. And your job is to do your due diligence and research those individuals so that you can make your top 20, top 30 wish list of who you want to sit down with and show your portfolio. And then the algorithm, of course, diplomatically disperses, and you generally tend to get your top 10 and then some. So the way that it works is every morning you get your schedule and you're schlepping your portfolio. In some cases, I've had friends, artists who have taken murals, rolled up murals to show curators. And you have 15 to 20 minutes to present your work to an individual. What I like about Lucida in particular is they vet their reviewers in the sense that if they're not bringing something to offer, whether it's a magazine profile, a group exhibit, a solo exhibit, any kind of opportunity, a book project, if they're not coming to Portland with something to offer, thank you, we really appreciate what you do, but you know, that's not what we're here for. We're here to promote the work of photographers. It is a very arduous process. It is taxing physically and emotionally. You can literally, every section, there's usually 3 sections in a day, and you will meet with 6 people in each section. So you have the potential of meeting with 18 professionals per day if you really have the stamina. One of the things that I tended to do, because the gallery I now work with is based in Dubai and Doha, the gallery I work for tends to look for imagery that is relevant to the Arab world or the Middle East. So not a lot of people in the Northwest or traveling to the Northwest have a tendency or travel to the Middle East. But so as a consequence, I was a floating reviewer, which meant I was in a lounge, and people could come to me, and it was a much more informal process where if it just didn't click, we talked for 5 minutes. It's nice to meet you. I appreciate seeing your work, and they move on. Or if we're really engaged, I would really spend a half hour with somebody. And because of my background in working with galleries, and because I worked in Portland, we worked and networked with a lot of galleries around the country. And as an appraiser, I do that as well when I'm doing research for specific artwork. So as a consequence, I really try and cherry pick the galleries they may want to approach. And these being my colleagues, many times I can tell them, you know, this particular curator hates waste. Don't even think about mailing a paper copy or a CD. Email her. Otherwise, you've really already undermined the potential with this person. Whereas with, you know, other colleagues, I can give different tidbits as well. And I have, this is PhotoFest in Houston, which is a much bigger event. It's 1 month. And I believe they divide it into 4 different weeks with different reviewers. There is a lot more corporate funding for the Houston Photo Fest because local businesses, and when I say local businesses, I mean major corporations who are trying to draw talent to Houston, fuel that by fostering cultural endeavors like Houston Photo Fest, because it also incorporates Museum of Fine Arts Houston, local nonprofits, major exhibitions. The other thing that also happens at these events is there's kind of a juried section, like a audience best. There's book prizes. You can get additional accolades above and beyond just hopefully securing that solo show or magazine profile. The other additional thing that Houston Photo Fest tends to have that Photo Lucida does not is more collectors who actually sit in as reviewers. So I've had photographers who have come back and have sold work as well as secured representation with a gallery. Another one is Lens Culture, and they do this in Paris right before Paris Photo, which is one of the big photography art fairs that I'll talk about a little bit later. And then MOPLA, so the Museum of Photography in LA, which is actually happening right now. It's during the month of April. And they were doing the Fresh Art Fair for a while, where photographers could literally rent their own booth and make a presentation to people who were coming for the event. They do also have portfolio reviews, for example, and it's both for photographers and curators. So if you're interested in seeing work, you can also submit. But it was kind of nice that photographers or artists could actually display their work. It was a little bit inverted versus the usual banquet table, a portfolio box. You could actually hang work for them to see. Palm Springs Photo Festival is another one. I have some colleagues who are in publishing who attend this one. One of the things I've noticed about this particular fair is there do tend to be more photographers who are reviewers. That can be sort of a mixed bag in the sense of many people I know aren't interested in a critique. They're interested in opportunity. You do tend to get more critiques about your work when you're sitting down with a colleague as opposed to someone who can give you an opportunity. So I do encourage artists to review the reviewer list very, very carefully and make a selection based on what their programming is like, what they tend to gravitate to, so that if you're a photographer who photographs the city and architecture, you're probably not going to want to sit down with a curator who gravitates towards more figurative and botanical studies. The other thing that Lucida has, and Lucida is something I champion just because I'm very proud of their mission and their endeavors. They also have critical mass, and this is a remote portfolio review conference. Well, it's not a conference. It's a remote portfolio review in the sense that you make a submission of 10 JPEGs as a portfolio, and there is an initial juried process. I think they are reviewing anywhere from literally 600 to 750 portfolios that then get culled down to 200. If you make the first cut, then there's the second phase, and your portfolio gets put on a DVD and also an online outlet and sent out to probably 150 jurors. And it's a wider swath of professionals, those who, for example, couldn't come to Portland and maybe in France or at MoMA and just can't take the time off to come to Portland for 4 days. They can review remotely in the comfort of their office or their home. And they are juried, and there is a book prize at the end. So that's additional opportunity as well. I actually saw, this was very, very smart. I don't know how many of you know the work of David Mizell. He's a San Francisco or Bay Area photographer who's established his reputation with sort of surreal aerial photography, and by surreal I mean it looks like artist's rendition of the surface of Mars, but they were aerial photographs in remote regions in the US. He was working on a wholly different kind of project using X-ray, and about halfway through the development of the project, he submitted it to the 10 images he had to critical mass, knowing that he was probably still about 6 to 9 months from completing the project. I was dumbstruck. I mean, it was so beautiful. It was so different. It was so striking. The first thing I did is I got on the phone and I said, David, can I show your work to a couple of galleries? And he said, of course. You know, I'm still 6 months out. I'm talking to a publisher. But that was really smart on his part because he was midstream. He knew where he was going. He knew what he had to finish, but he planted the seed, in part knowing that shortly after he released the project or was done, he had an exhibit at the Museum of Photography in Riverside, California. Now, how many artists do you know have a show almost as soon as they finish a project? I mean, it's pretty stellar. Most institutions are programmed 4 years out. Galleries are often programmed 12 to 18 months out. So that was sort of a smart thing on his part. He had a lot of people in the industry aware of his new work in one fell swoop. So photo festivals are another event that can be an opportunity. Here we have Photoville. Have any of you been to Photoville here in Brooklyn? Okay, just a few hands. I highly, highly encourage you to go. It is tremendous. It's in Brooklyn Bridge Park, right in Brooklyn. And what they do is they have gotten containers, as in those huge shipping containers, and different nonprofit organizations can set up a booth, if you will, but they also give opportunities to individual artists and photographers. And this last year was their second year, and it was 10 times better than the first year, which was fabulous in and of itself. A lot of people go through there. There's a lot of effervescence around this event. It was grassroots started. I think it's a graphic arts print center, and they wanted to do more, and they wanted something more for the local community, and they've been very successful in that. So I definitely encourage you to go. The Aural Festival, this is a very, very big festival in southern France. It's been going on for 20 years, I believe, or just over. It has numerous exhibitions. It is curated exhibitions. Some of them are in more warehouse-like event spaces, and some of them are in or right next to Roman ruins. It's a pretty extraordinary event, and you can see a lot of work in a very short amount of time. In addition, they have workshops with luminaries of the field, if that's of interest. The opening weekend is usually the second week of July, and it runs through the third week of September. A lot of curators also go to these events. Papillon is actually more for photojournalism, but a lot of photographers will submit to this as well. Again, potential opportunity to get your work in front of photo editors and people who can offer opportunity. Zoom Photo Fest, this is in a little town north of Montreal. They get a lot of cultural dollars because they're in such a remote location, and because they get so much state funding, they actually fly editors and curators from Europe into this little teeny tiny town in the middle of winter. And they also offer I'll call it a portfolio prize, in the sense that if they see a project that needs an extra financial push, they have a prize of $5,000. And there's another one, this one is also in Canada, the Scotiabank Contact Photo Festival. And then Le Mois de la Photo Montreal. This one is much more conceptual in nature. It is more of truly an exhibition festival. They tend to push the envelope in terms of topics. Last year, or rather it was last year, it was about drone photography, which was quite different. And this one is post photography. So awards. Obviously, the best thing you can do is have your work in front of people with influence and who can give you shows, whether it's a gallery or a museum. So Aperture, for example, has a portfolio prize. They also do a book award during the Paris Photo Art Fair. You have opportunity to be published. A lot of people see the work. Also, here's, for example, right now, they're doing a summer open. And many of them do have restrictions, sadly, but also there are quite a few competitions out there that do not. Be careful about reading the fine print. There are photo awards that are sponsored by, there was a major, very high luxury watch manufacturer that had a photo competition. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, I would never do that because you sign over the rights to your image. They can do whatever they want with it. So it's not purely philanthropic. The Lucy Awards is another award, and that event is held here in New York. Lucy is actually a nonprofit foundation based out of LA, and they also have a grant for students, so they're very involved. Pripite, this is a very interesting project. It is a purely curated exhibit. It's based on a theme. You can go to, if you go to the jury, if you go to the website and you go to the jury, you can see all the individuals who are the taste setters for this show, and you can choose by continent, and then it's alphabetical, and you can see who is actually making recommendations for this exhibit. What's great is it travels all over the world. Venues, whether they're galleries or nonprofit venues, are now lining up to take this show as it travels around the world. It's another one. This is in Switzerland. This particular prize is 5,000 Swiss francs, which is the equivalent of $5,660 as of yesterday. So that is very helpful too. There's the Foam Museum in Amsterdam. I believe they also have a prize. They tend to gravitate toward talent under 30. Good for them, but it can limit a lot of us. So resources. So consistent with the awards, some of you may know artdeadlines.com. This is a clearinghouse, if you will, one stop where you can cull a lot of competitions that are going on. There are some that are advertised for free. There's also a subscription as well. The one that I use is this one, or the one that I recommend is this one. And the Regional Arts and Culture Council is actually based in Portland, Oregon. And what's nice about this site is all you have to do is through these drop boxes, what kind of grant are you looking for? You don't necessarily have to put the kind of funding organization, but when it asks for locale, it'll ask you, do you want local, do you want national, do you want international? And then you can decide to specify your discipline or not. Many photographers are actually engaged in multimedia. Photography is just one aspect of their end product. So this is actually a really fantastic resource. Artist to Artist Network. This is actually a social media site for artists. So I'm not an artist, so I can't participate. I can look at work, but this is actually, there's a curator involved in this. And when you upload your imagery, you not only get feedback from your colleagues, the curator who runs the site will make recommendations of curators or galleries that you may want to approach, which is nice feedback. Kickstarter. So many of you probably are familiar with Kickstarter as far as crowdsourcing and raising funds for projects. Photographers, without question, have taken advantage of Kickstarter, mainly for, mostly what I've seen is books, funding books, like Myra Green is a photographer based in New York. She got full funding to publish her first book. I've seen photographers, there was another gentleman who had started a portrait series but needed the backing to continue, and I think it had to do with teenagers with AIDS. There was a theme to it. These are literally campaigns in that you have, first off, you get vetted, in that you submit your proposal, and what's very important about Kickstarter is you have to be making a thing. So for example, you cannot go to them and say, I really need a website to showcase my photography. They're like, no, that's not gonna work. But if you go to them and say, I have a photography project or a book project, you know, you're making something creatively, then you can make a proposal. They will say yay or nay. If they say yes, you build your campaign. They will, in some cases, actually sit down with you and help you strategize, which is very nice, and how the campaigns work so that you set up your page on Kickstarter in an optimum way. Many people have videos. There's a photographer locally. What's his name? I'll think of his name in a few minutes. So what he had done is he was using his photographs. He was photographing textures, but it was animal textures, like taking really close-up, macro, detailed, beautiful images of, say, bird feathers. And then he was applying them to canvas bags. And he wanted to go to mass manufacturing. And he had taken all the pictures, he had done all the testing with a local bag manufacturer. He had all the prototypes. It was good to go. It was a good product. He just needed that extra influx to actually go to manufacture. And it was amazing. And so he had as his awards, like if you gave $10, I think he sent you a pencil. If you contributed $75, you got a bag. If you contributed $500, you got the whole suite. So there's that reward system for being generous, and he was successful in that campaign. So if you have a very special project and you haven't had success for grants, or you're in the midst of applying for grants, which can take a long time, so especially locally, regionally, if the deadline is in September, they won't announce till January. So in that interim, there are potentially other opportunities. And aside from Kickstarter, Hatch Fund, actually, I think this used to be USA Artists. If any of you are familiar with USA Artists, based in California. This used to be their crowdsourcing platform, and it is exclusively for art, whereas Kickstarter can be, you know, a new mouse gadget, or it can be art, whereas this is just art. And then the other one, which is great, that some friends of mine have used, is IndieGoGo. And the reason I bring this one up is because I'm not sure about Hatch Fund, but definitely with Kickstarter, if you don't make your goal, you don't get any of the money. With IndieGoGo, you make what you earn. And you need to go back on there. In order to support themselves, they get 4%, and there is of what the earnings are, but there is different plans, if you will, different options, so that either you make all of it or you make whatever it is you raise. So that's actually been preferred by several of the photographers I've worked with, especially when they're working on projects that are a little more edgy or more politically oriented, and they're not sure how much support they're going to get. So there was talk earlier of the blurb books, the digitally produced books that are designed independently. So the 23 Sandy Gallery is a tiny little artist-run gallery in Portland, Oregon, and that's where I'm from. And Laura, who is the owner, she is an artist. She's a book artist, and the basis of her books are her photographs. And she has tested every single digital book producer that an individual can engage with. She's tested them all. She can give you feedback on the papers, how the prints are, which blacks are better, which ones aren't, which color, bleeds, etc. So one of the things I have here is I have a sheet of paper here at this table. So if anyone wants a list of all the URLs of the websites I've been showing you, including this one, I can email those to you. But this is a great resource so that you don't have to go to the expense of testing them all yourself. So, selling your work. Traditionally, it's been art galleries. We have art fairs are also playing a role when an artist is either represented by a gallery or has the opportunity to independently show their work. But we're also starting to see online venues. So many of you may be aware that the APAD show the opening is this evening, and public hours start tomorrow, and they'll be through Sunday. So APAD stands for the Association of International Photography Dealers. So, and it's held at the Park Avenue Armory. Galleries, many of them from New York, some from the West Coast, some from Europe, come to Portland, come to New York. Where am I? Come to New York to exhibit their photographs and sell to the public. So it's like a mini gallery. And one of the things that's really nice for you as an artist is if you live here in New York and you are interested in a gallery, and say it's in LA, there's a very good chance that they could be exhibiting either at this fair, they could exhibit at Armory, they could exhibit at some fair that comes to New York, and you would have opportunity to see them in action, see the kind of work they're displaying, how well they're selling, so that you can actually get a read on what it might be like to work with that gallery. I discourage artists to approach dealers during a fair because you need to understand that it's extraordinary expense at the potential of extraordinary opportunity. These are very expensive endeavors for the gallery. They are paying tens of thousands of dollars to participate and fly out and ship everything out, and it's very important for them to sell work to new clients, existing clients, etc. So if you are going to introduce yourself, make sure it's at a pause. They're not engaged with a client. You're not stepping in the middle of a potential sale. Be courteous because it's a very difficult business. Art is a luxury good. It's the last dollar spent and the first dollars cut out of any budget. And we are coming out of a recession. So be gentle, but leave your card. There's no reason why you can't go. If the gallery owner is obviously engaged with a client, you can turn to the assistant who's standing there, very dutifully, and you can say, I'm a photographer and I'm interested in submitting to your gallery. What's the process? And either they'll tell you, they'll refer you to the website, they'll say, oh, we're not looking right now, or yes, we only look in August. They can give you the loan. So you can have that little bit of interaction, and on occasion you can actually introduce yourself. And I encourage that because marketing people are now saying that you need 3 points of contact before you'll get someone engaged. And if you have the opportunity to meet them, leave your card, follow up by email, and then by phone, mail them something. It's one of those points of contact. So that's a good thing. There's also Photo LA, which happens in January every year. And there's also the Classic Photographs LA Fair. It's also a chance for you to see really good work. I mean, galleries are just as much a museum as they are a marketplace. So you'll see a lot of extraordinary work that doesn't necessarily make it to the gallery walls or is in a museum's storage for many months or years. So I definitely have found in my experience that it's just as important to look as it is to shoot. And I have actually seen gallery owners. I've seen a couple of gallery owners who started out as photographers before they opened a gallery and watched the evolution of their work over the years just because they were around good work all the time. So I definitely encourage you. There's also the Paris Photo Art Fair, which I've been fortunate to attend the last 5 years. What's nice about this fair, whether it's in Paris or coming up in LA at the end of this month, is Paris Photo is a little bit more unusual only in that it has exhibitors, galleries that are the full gamut of the history of photography, from the 19th century Henry Fox Talbot exhibiting galleries to the most contemporary, cutting edge, you know, Thomas Ruff kind of work and everything in between. Whereas with APAD and the classic photo fair, you know, these are all great galleries. You'll see a lot of early and mid 20th century work, much more classical. And this is a full breadth. There's even dealers who carry vernacular work, which is really great. This is the Unseen Photo Fair. This is in Amsterdam. This is a new art fair under the umbrella of Foam Museum, which again is a relatively young museum. The Foam magazine is really about young emerging talent. You know, what the new museum is to New York, Foam Museum is to photography in Amsterdam. And they do have a new fair, which I hear is really wonderful. There's Photo Fever in Brussels. Oh, and one of the nice things for things like Perry Photo is they will have a book competition, an artist book competition. And there are also publishers who have booths at these fairs. So it's extraordinary how much people love photo books. There's such a reverence for it, and it's really showcased. And the artists who get the book prize, I mean, they skyrocket. It's very interesting. And that stems from the history of photography, in that the book has always been a way to distribute photographs from the very beginning, whether it was Henry Fox Talbot's Pencil of Nature or the French presses when they were doing all the travel in Egypt and the Arab world. This is another fair in Milan and one in Tokyo. And then there's nonprofit spaces. I definitely encourage you to apply to nonprofit spaces. So once again, I'm going back to Portland, Oregon. Blue Sky is a very, very important nonprofit photography space, and it's spearheaded by the efforts of Chris Rauschenberg, who is the son of Robert Rauschenberg. If you look at the history of this gallery, and it's about 30, 35 years old, they were showing Robert Frank in the 70s. They showed Abelardo Morel in the 80s. A lot of photographers who really just, you know, came into their own, whether it's the 80s, 90s, 2000s, many of them had their early shows here. So it's got a very extraordinary history. It's also in a new space. It's an absolutely breathtaking space. And it's vote by committee. So they do have the submission policy on the website, and they have a review panel. They tend to gravitate toward environmental work, social documentary or social issues, but also they're showing more experimental work. And they also have, hopefully, ideally, they can get the artist in town to give an artist talk concurrent with their show. And there's Photograph. It's now Photograph Magazine. The URL is photographmag.com. It's just an advertising venue for any institution that's showing photography. It was originally called Photography in New York, but you can comb through very, very easily and see who all the galleries who are showing work. It also has other resources like printers and supplies. And if any of you haven't seen the Charles Marville show at the Met, please go. It's an absolute jewel. There's also photographynow.com. This is an online directory solely dedicated to exhibitions of photography and video. It is galleries, institutions, events, other usually means awards, and artist talks. And what's nice about this, the advertising organizations are the ones that have images. So it is an advertising venue. However, you can actually do a free listing on this site. Anyone can, whether you're a gallery or an artist. There's also an artist page, and it highlights just artists, and then they cull it by different categories and also by country. So that's another way you can get yourself into the database. One of the things I do as an appraiser, the nature of appraising is doing research and due diligence. And one of the things I love, while I do appraise a lot of the greatest hits and the classic photographs of the 20th century, I also many times get works I've never seen by artists I've never heard of, which is great because I love knowing more. And these kinds of databases are really invaluable for me, especially if the artist doesn't have a secondary market history, secondary market referring to the auction market. So I encourage you, if you're having an exhibit or a book release, to get your name out there. And many of you may have heard that Amazon.com now has Amazon Art. So if you are a vendor on Amazon, you can sell your artwork. There are actually galleries that have the Robert Klein Gallery in Boston, for example, is now posting photographs and selling them through Amazon. It is a young platform. It will be very interesting to see how this does. I have one colleague who's been working for one of the online auction platforms called The Real Real. And 15 years ago, there was a whole outcropping, 15 years ago, 1999, plus there was a whole outcropping of, many of you may remember Next Monet. It's when ArtNet started. And it was these platforms for galleries to exhibit and sell artwork. It ended up being more of an ancillary website than an actual sales platform. That's being revisited because apparently the tools are better, improved. There's a new generation coming to maturity and has dollars to spend to decorate, buy, what have you, and they're engaged through their mobile devices. So this is a new era. It's difficult to say how it will pan out. It is somewhat worrisome to someone like me because I'm about connoisseurship, I'm about craft. This again, you're looking at a 72 DPI screen. They're making judgment based on image and name, and price. So it'll be interesting. And then I do have an artist in Portland, again, a very sweet gentleman by the name of Ray Bittigan, who has been selling his platinum prints on eBay for over 7 years. And he's been doing quite well. And obviously you can see landscape, still lifes. He also does portraiture. And he was a very interesting sort of case study in the sense that he called me up about 6 years ago and he said, a gallery I much admire, or rather a dealer I much admire, who's private entity but participates in the photo fairs, this dealer has offered me representation, but the catch is it's exclusive representation, which means I can't sell through any other venue and I have to give up the eBay. And I asked him, I said, well, how much are you selling annually on eBay? And he said $15,000 worth of photographs. And I said, wow, that's pretty great. I mean, you can see how much his work is. And so I asked him, I said, okay, so this is an opportunity here. Are you willing, in worst case scenario, to give up Are you able to live without that $15,000 next year? And he said, well, yeah, it would suck, but yeah, I'll do it. So he did. And one of the things I said to him, I said, there's usually a renewal point. Check to see when your opt-out is, you know, or if things go great, then you renew. And a year later, we talked, and the gallerist hadn't sold anything, and he was back on eBay. But you got to remember too, this particular gallery, and again, it was a dealer he much admired, who sells $40,000 Westons and sells $50,000 or $5,000 photographs by other contemporary artists. If his work is selling for $500 or $550, obviously he needs to keep the lights on too, and it's easier to sell a known entity, like everyone knows the name Weston, than it is to promote the career of an unknown. So that's the other thing you need to also bear in mind as well, that especially the more established galleries, when we're talking the blue chip galleries, whether it's Howard Greenberg, Edwin Hoke, etc., they will take you because you have name recognition. Because there's so much time, effort, and expense in building a market that if you're not coming with that, then it's a goal gallery. So you pay your dues with the smaller galleries and the awards. One of the photographers I like to point out is Richard Mosse, M-O-S-S-E. He, very talented young man. He has a book at Aperture now. He's tender 33 years old. He got a Guggenheim at age 30. You look at his resume, and he literally submitted to every single juried show possible. And I mean, it's literally, the list is this long and the type is this big. And that was probably one of the smartest things he did, because he now has this impressive network of curators, freelance curators as well as institutions. And it snowballs. And he is known by so many people. So that was really, really smart of him to do. And the other thing that Richard did, which I thought was very intelligent, is he worked at, I believe it was Art News, could have been Art in America, but he was doing the gallery listings. And he actually read all of the press releases. And he did that deliberately so that he would understand the philosophy of the gallery. And that, for him, got him to decide who he was going to approach when he was ready to approach a gallery, which I thought was also very, very smart. Thank you so much for your time.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.